Did you ever hear the expression, a broken clock is right 2 times a day? Well, how about if we add to that and say, a working clock that's set to the wrong time is never right? Today we're going to talk about time and how God, this is going to be theorizing, how God exists in a different time and how that relates to our time. So come along with us. Before we dive into how time works, let's first talk about how God described time to us. In Genesis 1:15, he described the darkness, then the light. And then he said repeatedly, the darkness and the light was the first day. The darkness and the light was the second day. So when we get to Genesis 2:2, after the 7 days are created, we found out that that's a week. So the way God put time in order for us, in Genesis 1:14, he said he put the stars and the planets in alignment to be signs, seasons, days, and years. It's a way of us to count. What he wanted us to do was count time, not just display time, but count it. So it was a constant count. So now that brings us into the Jews. I want to just talk briefly before I get into time about how the Jews were told to reckon time. What they were supposed to do is starting at the beginning, the first month would be in the spring. When the barley was ready to be harvested, they called that the month of Abib. And what the Jews were supposed to do was start counting when they saw the first sliver of the moon. That would be the start of the month, the first month. And then they would go through the months. Each time they would see the first sliver of the new moon, that started the next month. So when God told the Jews at the mountain that, the Day of Trumpets would be the seventh month, first day, Passover would be the first month, 14th day at evening. When he said all these things, this was the calendar he was talking about. And the Jewish calendar should be this. The Jews have a calculated calendar now. They don't go by this. They have their days set and whatever the moon falls on. Their calendar is right 60% of the time. But God told them to start counting when they saw the sliver of the first moon. It turns out that every month is about 29.5 and change days. So you don't know a month is going to be, if it's going to be 29 days or 30 days. You have to wait until you get there in the start of the next month. That's what makes the Day of Trumpets so tricky, because the Day of Trumpets is the seventh month, first day. So you go to bed on the 29th not knowing, or the end of the 29th, you don't know if at evening this is the first day. It's a holy day, a holy convocation. You don't know that. You don't know that until you get to evening. That mimics the Day of Trumpets at the end, because nobody knows when the Day of Trumpets comes. These are all the ways that God taught us that we need to keep time in order by counting. So what happens when it starts walking, you get what they call a darbet, which is a second 12th month. And that happens every several years. And that keeps the times in season. This is what God instructed us to do, to keep the month of the Abib right when the spring was. So if after the 12th month finished, if the barley wasn't ripe, they added an additional month. That's how the Jews were meant to keep the time, and that's why we're screwed up now. So if you look at our calendar kind of represents almost back to the Jewish calendar. So when we say September, sept means seven. October, oct is 8, November, nov is 9, and December, dec is 10. So you can see how our calendar sort of mimics it, but it's not right, because their calendar tends to rock a little bit. Our calendar doesn't, and that's required for us to precisely pinpoint when the day of Passover is and when the day of Pentecost is, because these change. If you look in 2024, we as Christians, I should say the Christian churches did this. I didn't. Christian churches did this. They nailed Pentecost a full month, because it was in a darbet, a full month before it should have been, because the sighting of the moon was well past that, and it was in a darbet, so that's how that worked out. All right, now I'm going to go into how time works. I've spent inordinate amount of time over the years trying to put together how time works. And this is just a theory, but seems the only thing logical to me. Um, if you could picture time, first of all, I want to say that I use my own theories on these kind of things. I say like, what color shirt? This is my plaid shirt theory. What color shirt was the person who invented plaid wearing? Well, I don't know, but I can tell you it wasn't plaid because it wasn't invented yet. So God invented time for our own use, for us to measure our own lives. That's why it is. So, like I said earlier, I was talking about time with the planets. That's why time's not universal, because by our standards, what time is it on a distant star? You can't tell. You can't even tell. So let's go into the theory of time. This is the way I imagine time. And God is outside of our time because he created our time. That's what I was driving at with the plaid shirt. So imagine time as a long line that goes miles and miles of people, and they're standing in line. And next to each person is a table. And as you step forward, every second you take one step forward, and you get to the next table, next table. Now, imagine this line is heading towards this big field, and this big field has these same tables scattered throughout them. These tables are everywhere. No particular order, they're just thrown out in this big field. Now, as you step through time, 1 second at a time, as you progress and see each table, at the end of the line, the person who goes through the turnstile is now dropped into this open field randomly, just thrown it somewhere in this big field where these tables are, and they can go back and visit each table and see things. So this is how, if God exists in this field, mastering this field, he can look at these tables and see the corresponding table where we are standing at. And he has the ability to actually influence us while we're standing at the table. Nobody else can. So when you cross over the turnstile, which in this case is dying, you become like immortal, eternal, and you'll be able to see time as a whole thing. You'll be able to look at these tables and say, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that. And if you think about it, once the current time passes, you already know that everything behind you is disorganized because the way I look at it is people live 3 days: yesterday, today, tomorrow. That's it. So when you look at yesterday, you don't look at yesterday chronologically. In my family, when we get together, we talk about times in the past, and we'll talk like maybe about an aunt or an uncle, and tell funny stories about what they did. But one thing we never do is we never tell the stories in order, going from when she was a young girl out. We just throw random stories. So once you go to the past, it's just like this open field. It's random, where you can see everything. So that's why God can see the end times from the beginning, because from his perspective, it's already happened. But he has the ability to influence it. So it means if you're not written in the book of God, to the book of life, I should say, for the end times, he can help you alter that and get your name written in the book. Or if your name is written in the book, you can get it removed by bad acts. So you can do, God has told us Jesus told us you could be righteous your whole life, and at the end start screwing up and lose your place in the book of life. So this is just a little bit of a theory that I wanted to talk about, because time is very important, because we don't follow God's time by following his biblical calendar and the way he told us to count time. Time is a count. It's a count. So here's what I want to say about that. When we don't follow God's timeline exactly, the pieces of history in the Bible don't make sense anymore. So let me ask you this. When was the Last Supper? Was it the day before Jesus died? Was it the day Jesus died? Or was it the day after Jesus died? Remember, 3 days in your life: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. What was it in Jesus' life? By our standards, the Last Supper was the night before Jesus died. It was the day before. But if you look at the biblical calendar, he starts the day at evening when the sun goes down. And the Last Supper occurred, according to the Gospels, in the evening. So Jesus died on the same day of the Last Supper. And that's the point I'm trying to drive you. All you have to be off is a little bit. The kingdom of heaven, you got to think of it like shooting a rifle at a soda can, 300 feet away. You have to be zeroed in on it. And if you move the barrel even a millimeter, you miss the can. And that's what Satan's trying to do to us. He's trying to just change something a little bit so it sounds plausible, but it's not. I think that's where I'm going to end this video, but I just wanted to give you an understanding. This is the fourth in the theory videos. I have one more theory coming up, and then after that, I'm just going to start diving into the Bible, going through different things. So if you could, hit the like button. It feeds the alligators. It bites other Christians, and maybe somebody will get something out of this. I'm not looking for millions of views. If I did, I would make cat videos. I'm not even comfortable talking in front of people and being on camera and all that. I'm doing this because I feel I have to do this because some things have to be said. I don't feel they're being said. So thank you. And you